Okay, welcome, lady and gentlemen, to this exciting panel. And you're all practicing professionals, and at some point you've interacted with the different arms of the business, which is CIOs, the ExCo, and the business leaders. Yeah, so I think to open us with this discourse, I wanted just to ask each of you to introduce themselves, what role you play within the organization, and what's your broad take of the subject matter before I set up some few questions to interact with.
All right, thanks, Tim. And my name is Dennis Mutinda. I currently operate in KPMG. I know most of you know any firm that is called KPMG and the rest are audit firms, and you think we're only looking at financials. We also change with time. We definitely have clients who need a lot of, let me say, transformation. And it comes with data and analytics as well. So this is definitely a service that is offered. We have been there for a while. We started in IT, obviously supporting audit, and we moved into analytics, obviously going with the trend. So thank you very much. We'll see what we can discuss more about visualization in this session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dennis.
Good morning. Anyway, yeah, so my name is Hatnel Ndungi. I'm the Chief Data Officer at Absa Bank Kenya, PLC. I look after 4 key specialties. The first one is business intelligence and analytics. Second one is data management and governance. Third one is artificial intelligence and data science. And the fourth is model analytics. We use visualization across all the different areas, and I'm happy to share my thoughts today about the topic.
Thank you. No mic.
So my name is Kimani Masi. I'm a trained data analyst and scientist from Predictive Analytics Lab. I currently work at finance agricultural tech that deals with insurance for farmers. So I support in terms of data analysis, data visualizations, and I'm going to share some of the concepts and ideas that I have against this topic.
All right. Okay, so while you're still holding the mic, Mercy, could you just give a highlight on how data visualizations can be made actionable?
So based off the domain that I am in, so it's very understandable to have the goals of what you really want those actions or even the insights to inform on. So understanding the goals and having the objective in mind, that means anytime you're working on a visualization, anytime you're thinking data, you have to have the end in mind. So for starters, you have to have the goal and the objective defined, and you also have to ensure that you have the right tools to do that. So you do not want to make a proposal of something that is not going to have a return of investment, especially to the business that you're working with. And thirdly, ensure that whatever you're trying to visualize, whatever information you're trying to pass across to your audience, they're able to diversify, they're able to integrate that into their daily use. So the outcome of what you're trying to visualize needs to be in line with what the business is about.
Yeah, thank you. So I think you mentioned about a return on investments and so being able to interpret the data in a way that it makes sense to the business. And maybe there's a principle around data visualization that it sits right at the nexus of the organization. It's the end of one process and the beginning of another. So the end, because, this question goes to Hartnell, you've been a seasoned data scientist. You know the process of data science cycle starts from data collection, cleaning, all the way to visualization, as articulating your reports. But then it also sets the pace for the beginning of a new phase. So picking up from what Mercy said about the ROI, and you hold a role of the CDO, which means you interact with the ExCo and the board. Yeah, what are these nuances that are the exco look at and every time they interact with the data visualization tools or charts that you've created?
From my experience, most executives actually look at gaps, exceptions. People want to see where the problems are. When you show a good visualization showing everything is panning out well, everyone will say, okay, so what are the exceptions? But what I've learned that when you're actually interacting with the senior executives, the first thing you should always ensure when you're actually presenting to them is make sure that you're actually communicating the simplest visualization possible, what you're trying to unravel. And this goes back to the definition of actionable insights. These are basically conclusions that you can easily draw out of a chart or a visualization that you're actually looking at. And if you're trying to ensure that you are showcasing to an executive, you have to go back to the design and the objective of why you're actually presenting that visualization. The concept of visualization actually has a founder, and he's still alive. For those who don't know that, there's a guy called Edward Tufte. And what Edward Tufte is called E.T., currently a professor at the Yale University. And what he came up with are simple guidelines to ensure that whatever you're presenting to an executive is actually actionable. So I'll give you three. They're around 5 or 6. I'll give you three. The first one is integrity. It's called graphical integrity. If you're going to present any information that is going to unravel insights or actions, then you have to ensure that you are not showing incorrect data. Many are the time whereby I've seen people coming with very good visualizations, but they are showing the wrong numbers with regards to growth. Many of the time I also see people coming with very good predictions on how the future is going to pan out. And again, if you look at the numbers, they are a bit questionable. Second thing is data to ink ratio. You're not supposed to go and create a visualization that is going to have so much to read into that it takes any audience 1 to 2 minutes to interpret what you're trying to deliver. As I said, when you're speaking to executives, they want to know exactly in less than 7 seconds, what are you trying to communicate? Yeah. And the last one I can give you is maybe the theory of small multiples. Sometimes when you're visualizing, it is important not to give everything in one page, build it up through storytelling. So give out a piece of information. From that piece of information, double click and ensure that you're able to show a separate graph or a second graph that gives a clear walkthrough on what you're trying to relay. And any audience looking at your visualization will actually be able to understand that.
All right. Yeah, so thanks, Arnold, for that submission. And I'd like to carry on with that, but focusing on a different audience. So Dennis, this goes to you. If on that continuum of, we have the executive on one side, and on the other continuum, you have the non-executive, which are now the general business users. But there's one common DNA which they have, which is they are non-technical users of these platforms. So how do you bring them on board to be able to use the technical tools, especially in data visualization, bearing in mind that they're not the ones who are developing the data? So how do you, first of all, win their trust to believe what they're seeing? And then secondly, how do you bring in the science part to be an art? Because I believe data visualization as a science, and then there's also an art.
All right. Let me start with the genesis of why visualization has become a norm, and people want to actually summarize their whole outcome through visualizing. You have a lot of paper. Sometimes you might go through and miss a lot of detail. If you're looking at a graph, it gives you a different angle to the same particular problem. How do you want to address this? This follows the whole concept of appreciating, first of all, what data are you using? So you need to know the data that you want to actually bring across, and you also need to bring in your audience into the picture. What kind of audience are you responding to? So that whatever dashboard or whatever visualization you're going to do for the executive is obviously responding to the needs of what the executive is looking for. What about the rest of the staff? They have key KPIs maybe that they're monitoring. That is the area that they're focusing on. How do you then coin that information into a message? So know the message that you want to actually pass across. And then also know the options that you can be able to take up. Because if you don't have options, then, and you've gone with only one angle of approach, you'd realize that someone would tell you, I think you have not yet gotten my point. this is what I expected. There are many angles to how you look at data, and we call them dimensions in that respect. I'll give you a simple example, like the way we have a dashboard in a car. By the way, if you know the origin of a dashboard, it was actually in front of a horse carriage, and it was blocking the horse poop from getting to the carriers. But that's not the purpose of what the dashboard is all about. Now, after that, when it became automated, people wanted to know how fast are they going? How much fuel do I have? All those indicators became what they wanted to focus on. And over time, if you look at even the latest vehicles, they have so much information, but you don't use all of them. The basic ones are still there. How fast am I going? How much fuel do I need? All those things come into play. Same thing to how you understand your audience and how you're going to bring it out so that they only have the time that you have to be able to see the message. And then from there, you can be able to move it to the next level, as Hartnell had mentioned, to drill down and now tell the data story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Dennis. And my next question now goes to Marcy in terms of if you look at the way the industry is evolving, and then also the demand for the skill of visualization. Yeah, where do you see this going into the future, and especially because we are looking at some of the things to look out for in 2023?
So my thoughts. Make sure my mic is on. So my thoughts on this: it will mean all businesses, all industry stakeholders will try as much as they can to adapt to data visualizations. So that will mean you have a one-stop shop. If you want to visualize anything, you want to know how many sales you've made, you want to know which system, which part of a workflow needs to be fixed or has something that is not working, you're able to know that from a point go. So you're going to have more real-time dashboards, something that is going to be embedded in the businesses, and you're going to be able to make real-time decisions without trying to, run around trying to get approval for whatever things that you need. So for the future, it's gonna be our daily thing to do. So anytime that you wanna make a decision, you're going to definitely depend on that dashboard.
Okay. Yeah, so when we come back, I'll be asking you a little bit more about dashboard. So just to unpack it a little more, what the technologies and all. But for now, for Hartnell, I wanted you to just articulate in terms of, we are talking about the demand for data visualization growing because the human mind cannot comprehend the much information that we are being hit with. And then, of course, businesses generating a lot more data than they were before, so we cannot typically rely on the traditional gut feeling. You remember, like, if you ask a Maasai how many cows they have, they'll tell you just by counting and remembering. But for a typical exco executive, if you ask about the numbers, they have to rely on that dashboard. So how do you develop a system that can ingest, process, and display huge and large amounts of data, both structured and unstructured?
So before I answer the question, I've asked a Maasai before how many cows he has. The answer was, there are many. They don't count their cows. Anyway, on the previous question on what is changing and looking into the future of visualization, before I forget 2 points, I've seen a lot of chat about video visualization, and this comes about because most of the dashboards you're consuming are basically static. Some allow you to actually interact, but I'm actually seeing people now coming up with tools that play in form of an advert. So imagine if you're actually looking at your cells, and they were actually flying videos of charts and how they are moving and having the different trends. And this is a new concept called video visualization. So it's very interesting. I was reading about it some time back, and I want to see exactly how that pans out. Number two is with regards to also something looking in the future, is augmenting artificial intelligence in visualization. I've seen a lot of voice or language-driven searches to actually create visualizations. A good example, if someone writes on his dashboard, show me the trend of sales for the last 10 years. This is not a created visualization, but what the tool enables you to do is that it's using your voice or your input as a language. It's able to go back, extract the data, create it in the form of a cube, and be able to visualize it for you. So very interesting things I've seen out there. With regards to creating capacity on being able to visualize, I think this question is bigger than just looking at the end state of visualization, because It speaks to the end-to-end life cycle of extracting information. So you have different technologies now that speak to how you're able to extract, transform, and load data, and ensure that it's in the right format before you visualize. There are people who work with Oracle. I've seen Oracle people in the building. There are people who work with Hadoop, like ourselves. There are people who work with Microsoft. So you have different tools that enable you to extract information from different systems, put it together, and ensure that you have the right kind of visualization. What I can actually speak to is mostly on the skills and capacity. For you to do it very well, you have to understand this is not a one-man job. You have to have the right kind of skills cutting across extraction, whereby you're talking about data engineers and architects who enable you to create the right kind of pipeline of moving data from one point to the other. Number two, you have to work with business intelligence developers who understand business requests in a very technical format that they can actually create dimension fact tables and cubes to be able to create the data in a format that can be easily visualized. Then you have people who are sitting closer to the business. These are your analysts, these are your visualization experts, and they go into these systems and they enable them to easily pick already pre-processed data and create simple visualizations for it. Now, what I'm seeing into the future, into 2023, is more of self-service analytics, that the hard part is done by experts. And what happens is that business now are being equipped with the ability to interact with a simple dashboard, and using drag and drop capabilities, they're able to create dashboards for themselves. That is something that is currently being done now. So if you're actually looking at how to create capacity, not only focus on the skill and the tech, but also remember that if you educate and make sure your frontline are very literate in creating visualizations, then there's less work for you with regards to insights delivery.
Yeah, thank you, Adnan, for that. So we'll unpack a little bit more about the self-service analytics. Yeah, but there's one part of the question you didn't answer, so I want to carry it on to Dennis. This was about unstructured data. Yeah, so Dennis, how do you develop a system? And I don't know how many of you are football fans. You supported any in the African Champions Cup? You remember the Senegal and Egypt game? Yeah? What did the Senegal goalkeeper do during the penalty shootouts? Yeah? He had what? No. He had a bottle which he had drawn the penalty trend over all the players who were taking the shootouts. So he was pretending to take water and he was checking the pattern for the players. That's a dashboard, yeah? It's visualization. You can search for it on YouTube, it's somewhere there. Yeah. So Dennis, how do you, that's unstructured data for me, right? Like a football match, video analysis, yeah. So, but in the context of a business, how do you balance structured data, unstructured data, and how do you visualize?
Okay, and I'm sure Hartnell might have explored this area a bit more, taking into consideration that he's in the market and we are actually trying to advise across the various markets. One thing that is crucial, and as I'd mentioned before, is knowing what data would make relevance and would actually work with your models that you're doing. And it's also good to know the source or the veracity of that source so that you can have, let me say, robust outputs. Otherwise, it becomes a bit useless, depending on where you're getting that information. If you're getting it from social media, for example, as unstructured data, would you use it to be able to predict how a football match will go because of how the fans are actually responding? Or are you looking at the metrics around these particular football players and their history, and also maybe their current tactical play, so that now you can make that conclusion? So in a business, for example, and you're looking at structured and unstructured. Structured is easy to get, and it might come from third parties, it might be internal. You're looking at where the sources are already brought out in a way that you can be able to make a conclusion, be it in a set of data sets from different sources. But unstructured, it's for you to be able to determine the logic. What are the signals you're looking for? What do you want to be able to conclude on? Is it a short-term signal or a long-term signal? What do I mean by signals? You're looking at data sets with regards to history and how they can predict the future. And for example, where you went to school, that is already static information. But there's occasions that are happening tomorrow and the day after. Those are dynamic signals. What does it mean for you to be able to use more of these dynamic signals to be able to make a conclusion on your data set? How does the static information help you to be able to make a conclusion as well? So it's a balance. And the business would normally look at what would be the key driver against what the business is also trying to achieve as its goal. And it involves, and by that I normally like pointing out, it involves the subject matter experts also being brought into the table so that you can be able to understand the scenarios, not as an analyst, but also as a business, and then now make conclusions on how to go forward. So structured and unstructured, it won't be, you can't put a straight line and say, okay, this is the amount of structured data that you'd use to be able to do your analysis, and this is the amount of unstructured data. But it's the relevance that you want to bring out. And then now you use the subject matter experts to be able to affirm those figures and numbers.
Sure. Thank you.
I can give you two, okay, let me see. Okay, let me give you three real life scenarios of what we have done previously with unstructured data. Number one, and all of this are relying on cloud computing capabilities on AWS. So we usually get people commenting on your different socials about how you're interacting. And this is actually feedback. And also on different channels, when you actually call in to get support, we're able to know exactly what you said, what are the key highlights.
Yep.
Now, most people have been taking this as input and structured data and creating sentiments. For us, we actually check it and be able to prioritize what actions are we going to embark on this case. So how do we prioritize which actions are going to be taken for a customer who was complaining about an issue, and how do we bring him back to the journey of having a better NPS, a better score for us. So we actually extract information using AWS in combination with Hadoop services, and we're able to use different deep learning solutions. One is collaborative filtering, cosine similarity, and BART by Google. And we're able to just put this together in a format that can actually be able to prioritize customers based on the issues they actually raise to us. Second one is now voice. When people call, and sometimes they're mad, and we tell you, we'll record this call so that we can serve you better. So what that means is that it's hard for someone to just sit down and listen to all of that. So what you do is hook that voice to an LLP solution that can actually be able to pick out the keywords that you are actually stating out in your conversation and run into the same model. Then easily we'll be able to know you're actually a high priority customer. You should follow through and see exactly how to help you.
All right. Yeah, so this subject actually is quite intensive in terms of our discussion. I know my time is up, but do you have questions for the audience? Yeah? 1 minute. All right, so let me just pick one question from the audience, and then we'll do the conclusion. Oh, it's already up? So we can...
Thank you very much. My name is Gilbert Mutai from Car and General. My question is around, for your dashboard to make sense to the audience. You look at timeliness in terms of, when I look at my dashboard, it's making sense based on the data that I'm getting. And we'd like to get the insight from the team in terms of how do you ensure that you get timely data in the system to make sure that your dashboard is making sense at that point in time. The other issue is, in terms of timeliness, how do you ensure that you work to ensure that your users are able to capture the right data? Because as one among you mentioned that it's about dimension and data, right? So how do you ensure that your dimensions and your measures are accurate so that your dashboards would make sense to the audience? Thank you.
Okay, so your question is in two parts, talking about the accessibility of the data for real-timeness, and then how do you make sure that the data makes sense to the end user? Yes, so Atnel, you can take the latency, and then Marcy, you can take the making sense to the user.
So I'm taking the real time.
How do you make sure that it was similar to the first question you answered about actionability of the insights to the end user?
All right, okay, thank you. So to answer your question, so you need to have the end in mind, like I said. So you need to know what sort of outcome do you want to communicate to your end users. And that will enable you to create the logics behind when you're creating the dashboards. So by that, I mean, you're able to know how do you want to decipher the information that you want to communicate to the user? Is it a one-stop shop where they're able to see everything at a go? or do you want them to think through the visualizations that you're already given them? So you need to know and get your goals straight before you employ that dashboard or create it for the end users.
Okay, thank you. Adnan?
Simple answer to your question is implement the right plumbing. And what I mean is that most times, most people who are doing the work of visualization start off their work from an extract, either from CSV or Excel. So you tell the database, people extract for me data, it's sent on an email, put in a folder. So much manual steps that are going into that. Create connect a pipe from the source system to your visualization tool. It may be working on a near real-time basis, maybe latency of 4 or 5 or maybe 12 hours. You can have all the database solutions doing that for you. If you want more real-time data, then you have to implement something called stream sets. Now, stream sets is a technology that works like a post office, whereby they're giving you data in small pieces. When an envelope comes, it's being sent. They don't batch up everything and work at night. As it comes, it goes. So with stream sets, you can actually be able to ensure you have real-time data coming to your visualization tool. So it's actually updating as users consume. But it's all about plumbing. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, thank you. You. Okay, thank you for...
My name is Kanda from Ghetto Streets Hospital. Question to you, Tom, and to the larger group. When COVID came, we know there was all our data became erratic in some sort of way. How do you do predictions on your data, especially now that seasonality is affected? Are there formulas that you can be able to use to circumvent that? How do you make sense of that data over the last 3 years? Thank you.
All right. Yeah, so I'm the moderator, so I'll bounce the question to the panel. Now, the question, you understood the question?
All right.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. One thing that obviously we learned through the COVID period was areas of consideration that we need to add onto our whole spectrum of models that we are doing. And also looking at history, what we might have left out. I remember even the previous panel that was sitting here was talking about bias and the information that you're actually feeding or training into your models, which now helps you to now come up with the visualizations. We are learning, we are still not perfect. You can never be 100% on the prediction of what the future will hold. What you can do is work with maybe the past history of what has been, let me say, available to be able to actually train the models accordingly. That is, in fact, a new learning of where people are now looking at scenarios beyond what you know about COVID. People are even thinking of other viruses that might be coming, and then also disruption comes in the same way. Over and above that, digital transformation has opened up the door for us to think beyond what we currently experience on a day-to-day basis. Meaning then, when you're applying the model, it's the same things that I was just touching on in the previous comment. What would be key to be able to check as a dynamic control check or a signal that would now be important to now monitor on a regular basis? Can you add it to your model so that now it now enriches it? Even if the scenario hasn't happened yet, then you would still have comfort on a certain level of how the outcome would be. But it cannot be 100%. That's what I would say.
If I can quickly chime in 1 minute, I believe you're a technical guy, so let me give you a very technical answer. You can't model out COVID. So the assumption was that the data is spoiled. It's not spoiled. So what happens is that you can actually use a time series model. I can give you one, Arima Gach. You can actually be able to pull out the COVID shock effect and give you a very small line that will still show you the frequency of how you're operating. Second approach is eliminate that data set and use interpolation. Predict using your history how everything will have looked without COVID. Then you'll be able to now see exactly how you're progressing. But one key learning, add now time series vector error correlation models into your current models, because we'll all need models that can predict another COVID. So you can't eliminate that. So time series is your answer.
Yeah. All right. So one parting shot for each of you, 2 seconds. Just what you think might have make an impact to the audience as we step out of this podium.
Right, that's quite difficult, but I'll try. So for me, a parting shot will be always have the end in mind. never start off any analysis, never start off anything without having an end in mind, and that will enable you to communicate the outcome that you want to your stakeholders or even your business. So always have the end in mind.
Okay.
Data skills are like Excel skills. Everyone needs them these days. So make sure you do your packages. Thanks.
Okay, and on top of that, maybe I can advise around when you're doing your visualizations, have it key in your mind. Are you trying to achieve a comparison for the audience to be able to appreciate? Are you looking at composition to be able to look at the full picture? Are you trying to be able to look at a distribution over time or over a certain spectrum? Or are you also trying to look at relationships? That helps you now bring out the visualization to meet what the audience is expecting out of it.
Yeah. Thank you. Otherwise, that's all from us. You can continue interacting with us on the social media platforms, especially LinkedIn. Yeah, and I'd like to thank my panelists for being gracious enough to make this discussion fruitful, and also the organizers of this event. And I wish you all the best in the remaining sessions. Thank you.
Right.